Russia says it has not lost its war in Ukraine. Moscow is now focusing on the eastern parts of Ukraine after it invaded its neighbour in February. The West and Ukraine have accused President Vladimir Putin of unprovoked aggression. Russia insists that it wants to demilitarize Ukraine and eradicate what it calls dangerous nationalists supported by NATO military alliance. SABC News Khayelihle Khumalo sat down with Russia's press attache in Johannesburg, Arefiev, who says that Moscow has not committed war crimes in Ukraine. Let's take a look.
In Kramatorsk, they did the same thing. So in Kramatorsk, what basically happened, the city is under Ukraine's control, and civilians were asked to gather at the railway station. And then a missile from Attache missile system was launched and attacked this station, causing serious casualties among civilians. But first of all, Attache is not used by Russian military, and it's been quite a while since we actually removed it from service. But it's actively used in Ukrainian forces, and the trajectory of the missile clearly pinpoints that it was shot from the Ukrainian side, and even the number which was found on the debris of this rocket, on the fragment of this rocket, it clearly points to Ukraine. It's part of this is the exact reason, as our foreign minister said in one of his interviews, this is the exact reason why this video clip of this attack, and while this topic is not raised, basically hushed in the West now, because it clearly points to Ukraine, clearly sets its provocation. So unfortunately, the Kyiv regime just continues on with more atrocities, with more casualties against civilians. If you think that they have abandoned the practice of hiding behind civilians as human shields, then you are wrong. They still use the civil infrastructure as a cover. They still use civilians as human shields. They still commit crimes against civilians. None of this gone. And well, with the acquiescence of the West, the Ukrainian authorities just keep doing this.
What do you make of the civilians that have been killed? So you talk about denazifying, you talk about demilitarization, but undoubtedly some Ukrainians have died here. What's Russia's response to that?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, yes, an armed conflict, it always leads to civilian casualties, indeed. And as I said, well, I'll say it again then. What's happening in Ukraine is first and foremost tragedy for Ukraine and Russia. So Russia came not to destroy civilian infrastructure or kill civilians or just commit atrocities. We came to stop the war that has been conducted by the Kyiv regime against the civilians for 8 years. So unfortunately, due to their practice of like hiding behind the human shields and stuff, they deliberately put the civilians on the front line to then put the blame on Russia for the atrocities and for the civilian casualties. Unfortunately, yes, the casualties do happen, but Russian military does everything in its power to reduce the number, to avoid casualties among the civilians. This is why we're attacking military infrastructure uniquely. We're attacking the armed forces uniquely, not the civilian infrastructure, not the civilians. While Ukrainian side, on the other hand, they deploy heavy equipment, they deploy troops in densely populated areas. They fail to agree on humanitarian corridors. They block the humanitarian corridors that are leading to east, to Russia. Mind you that they don't block the corridors that go to the west. So they do everything to keep the civilians because they use them as a shield. This is their tactics. And unfortunately, yes, we mourn for every life lost in this conflict because loss of human life is a tragedy. We fully understand that. But, well...
And what do you make of the international response? We have seen, for example, the International Court of Justice, and we've seen the ICC prosecutor Khan going to Ukraine and really just making remarks to the effect that some war crimes might have been committed in this instance.
Well, the war crimes committed by Ukrainian side, well, I hope they will take due note of that. And there were numerous war crimes committed long before Ukrainian conflict, like US committed war crimes in Iraq. NATO destroyed Yugoslavia, NATO destroyed Libya. Has anyone investigated those war crimes? Over 1 million of civilian casualties took place in Iraq, over 1 million. civilian casualties. None of this has been investigated. So it's, again, double standards coming from the West. So the atrocities and war crimes committed by the West, by the US and its allies, well, we can turn a blind eye on this. We don't launch the investigations and stuff. But when they try to blame Russia of everything, anything goes. So it's high time they remembered about the war crimes. And they should have done this long ago, when they committed numerous war crimes, I repeat myself, numerous war crimes elsewhere in the world.